Welcome back to another episode of the Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and today's guest is fitness icon Mark Bell. You may recognize Mark from his popular podcast, which I was fortunate to be a guest on, or from his innovative fitness products, or perhaps from his entertaining social media content. But Mark is so much more than that. He is one of the most respected people in the health and fitness space and has tons of life lessons and wisdom, as well as an incredible story to share, which we are going to unpack today. So let's get this conversation going and welcome Mark Bell to the Adversity Advantage podcast. Mark Bell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm fired up. What do we got going on here today?
What we got going on is things have come full circle, and I was super blessed to be on the Power Project with y'all. And I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and your story is super inspirational. So wanted to get you on my show.
Yeah, that was a great show. We went in deep. So I love that kind of conversation.
Yeah, we definitely went deep. And what I noticed is, I know you take like great interest in all of your guests you bring on, but I remember I was standing next to you and you seemed very like intrigued, in depth about my story, especially when it came to the addiction, the mental health stuff, because I know you've had your own journey with that. So like, what was it about my story that kept you like really wanting to learn more as it related to your own life?
You know, I love a good comeback story. I love hearing how somebody got through particular adversities. For myself, I haven't really kind of, sometimes people are like, oh, I was in like a dark place, like and that kind of thing. And they get addicted to drugs, or they are just not acting in a way that they really like. For myself, I had so much of that around me from the time I was young, from my oldest brother, Mike, and seeing kind of the way he acted and some of his friends and stuff like that. I just knew that was never a life that I wanted to live, but I did always want to have an understanding for it because, my brother died young, and I've also had a lot of other friends die from addiction. Being a professional wrestler for several years, probably had double digits in terms of people that I knew dying from drug overdoses and stuff. And this day and age, you hear so many people talking about the different struggles that they face. And I'm in agreement with Joe Rogan when he says the worst thing that ever happened to somebody is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. So regardless of whether you and I think somebody's being a big wimp when they are just upset because of a comment on social media, that literally might be one of the worst things that happened to that person. And what that person said to them may be something that did indeed cut deep. So I always like to know the story from people of how they overcame various things. The more that I learn about that topic, the more I feel like I can help other people, and the more I think I can like empathize with other people.
Yeah, it's so true. And I remember you kind of sharing with me about your family history and how that helped inspire you in a way to sidestep drug addiction and other like substances that could have potentially damaged your life. I know one of the other things that has been a pivotal tool in your life has been fitness. And I know fitness has played various roles in your life. Like, how has your relationship with fitness evolved from when you were a kid, like witnessing stuff that you saw like your brother doing and others around you, to where it is now?
Yeah, fitness has obviously been a thing that has really kept me grounded and has kept me humble. I actually was watching the movie Hustle last night with Adam Sandler. I wasn't watching it with Adam Sandler. He wasn't like in my house. I was watching it. He's in the movie. It was really, really awesome movie and motivational in a lot of ways. But I thought to myself, like, how interesting in basketball, like how much trash talking there is in basketball. It's kind of a thing in basketball and in football. And for some reason, when it comes to lifting weights, you don't see it as much. When it comes to something like jiu-jitsu, you don't see it as much. You see it a little bit in MMA. I think the guys kind of learn that they make more money if they, shout at each other and make it more interesting in that way. But I think that lifting weights is very humbling in a lot of ways. And it's particularly, look at how hard Olympic lifting is. You don't hear a peep from those guys. Honestly, you don't hear anything. There's one or two Olympic lifters that I can think of that have been people that have kind of bragged or, shown off a bit. But for the most part, those are really, really humble people. And the skill set that it requires to be able to Olympic lift, or the skill set that it requires to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or to do powerlifting even, because we got 3 events. We have a bench press, a squat, and a deadlift. Most likely, you're going to suck at least one of those 3 things. And there's going to be something that it's either like tons of hard work that you have to put in, extra work, extra workouts, extra time, extra money, going to seminars, reading books, learning. There's going to be a movement in there that you're not great at. Maybe you're kind of gifted at some of them, but it's extremely rare to be gifted at all 3. So for me, lifting weights has been something that has kept me grounded for so many years and has helped me gain perspective. And again, kind of going back to that thing of like, I think that so many things in life are choices. Unfortunately, some of the choices that are in front of us due to our environment sometimes are very limited. I didn't have a choice to like sell drugs on the corner when I was a kid. I never saw that. I didn't grow up in that kind of environment. I didn't grow up in like an inner city where that would have been something that I saw often. I saw people playing sports. I saw people working out. Both of my brothers worked out. That's the path that I went down. I was like, this seems cool. I want to be like my brothers. I don't want to be the little brother my whole life. I'd like to kind of, get my own identity somehow. And I've just thought like, man, if I stick with this, I actually seem to be a little bit better off than both of them when it comes to this. If I hang in there long enough, I think maybe over some time I can be as strong as them, which is kind of a crazy thing for me to think of, especially when I think about how big and strong my oldest brother Mike was and how strong my brother Chris was. He squatted 675 when he was like 19 years old, like just coming out of high school. He was a freaking beast. Came to powerlifting. Still this day, he's very, very strong. So fitness has been a thing that has humbled me a lot. And just when you think that you're good at something in fitness, something else will pop up. Like if we had a contest in the gym today and we were to do a rope climb, I'd be out. Like a bunch of other people that work here. We have a girl that does customer service. She's a gymnast. She'd probably kill everybody on that, because her strength to body weight ratio is probably very high. Where mine is probably pretty good when it comes to like lifting weights, but lifting my own body weight is something that can sometimes be more challenging. So I love the fact that in fitness, you can be dragged out into deep water kind of no matter what you are. You could be a runner, you could be a cyclist, but if we come in here and we do 10 sets of squats, you're going to get your ass kicked. In the same token, the guy that's really proficient at squats, that can squat 600 pounds for maybe some reps, probably is going to have a tough time jogging even just 2 miles because the size of the person's legs are probably pretty damn big. And I would imagine that they would be pretty heavy. So I've always loved the humbling side of fitness.
Yeah, I love that. And fitness can certainly humble you, especially when you're trying something new. And you brought up the idea about choices and what's in front of you. And you've gone through different moments of adversity in your life between losing your brother, losing your mom, and other things that have come up along the way. And you could have certainly gone down the rabbit hole of addiction if you wanted to. You could have certainly done other things to self-medicate. But I know fitness has been a constant in your life for channeling some of that pain into something meaningful. How has working out and fitness been a positive outlet for you during moments of struggle?
Yeah, there's so many different versions of pain, just like there's many different versions of strength. Again, like, somebody bench pressing 500 pounds versus somebody being able to, use the rings in gymnastics and be able to do an iron cross, right? Like the guy that benches 500, he's not going to be able to do the iron cross. And the guy that does the iron cross, I mean, most likely, right? Maybe there's a couple mutants out there that can figure that out. So when it comes to pain, there's many different versions of pain. And I just have noticed that you can cause your own pain and your own suffering by making choices that aren't maybe in your best interest for the long term. You can also choose pain and suffering to do to yourself, to go through for yourself, to build yourself, which is kind of crazy, right? It's like if you do drugs, you might get the short-term bang of like, I'm high, or whatever that thing is that you're getting from a particular drug. But then you also kind of get let back down, right? And the ups and downs of like lifting or running, the downside of it isn't really that crazy. And the upside of it also isn't like crazy, but sometimes it can feel very euphoric. Sometimes it can feel incredible. Even when it comes to drugs, I always just thought, like, if you're going to use drugs, why not have them be to your benefit rather than to your detriment? Why not find drugs that maybe you're not going to get so addicted to? Like, I think something like mushrooms are like, or psychedelics in general. I think these are, in some ways, I think these are great, powerful drugs, powerful plants that we have access to that more people are aware of now. But imagine if somebody who was kind of seeking those thrills and seeking this and that ended up doing cocaine or heroin or opiates, if they discovered psychedelics beforehand. I've done some mushrooms, I've done some LSD, and there's nothing that calls to me to like want to do them all the time. They make me feel too weird, but to me, it's like an introspective look. You get to kind of look inside yourself. You're left a lot with your own thoughts. In seeing like a lot of other people in fitness, seeing people at the gym and seeing the community of people. I used to train at Gold's Gym in Venice, and it was like walking into a sitcom. You know, you remember when you watched Cheers, if you ever watched Cheers, like I'm older, 45, so Cheers was a show, or Friends, or Seinfeld. When they walk onto the set, everyone's all happy. Like, hey, like everyone makes a big deal. The same thing happens when you get involved in a community that is a fitness community. You get involved in like a local CrossFit gym, and when you walk in, people are all pumped up. When you walk into a powerlifting gym, like people don't walk into super training without getting unrecognized. It doesn't matter if you are social media famous or not. Like everyone, when you walk in, everyone's like, yo. Same thing with working here at Slingshot. You've been here and you kind of saw what it was about, and that's the way it is. And so you have this kind of community that makes you feel great every day. And so some of the pain and suffering that you might do to yourself, inflict upon yourself in your training, is really just a building block to build habits, to get connected strongly to habits, and then have those habits. Once you start doing those habits often, then other people outside of that community will point to you and say, you know, that's so-and-so. He's a lifter in the family. You know, that's Andrew Zaragoza. He's a fitness guy. You know, and none of us, I think, really sought out to like be these certain things within the community necessarily, but we are. And then within our own families and within friends of family and stuff like that, like for some circles, we're the only people that they know that are that obsessed with fitness, that really like it that much. And again, I got to go back to the fact that the suffering is such a strong word, you know? So, and self-induced suffering via like lifting weights is a little bit silly, but in a way. But what's your other choices in life? You know, your other choices are, you're going to suffer anyway. I have friends that have, you know, they're like, man, I don't know how you still do all that powerlifting stuff, because my back is, and they didn't do anything. They don't deadlift. They barely work out. All they did was push a pencil for the last 10, 20 years, stuff like that. So pain and suffering, it's all coming our way. I've mentioned it in the Fuck Your Elbow video that went viral a couple years ago. And so if we already know that, why not induce or inflict a little bit of pain and suffering on ourselves to advance ourselves, to grow? Like the body doesn't grow. The mind doesn't grow. The body or the mind, neither one grows without a challenge. If we just sit here and add and subtract ones and twos and threes and fours and fives, it's not enough for our brain to grow. If we just hit the gym at a level 1 or don't do anything to challenge ourselves, even worse, which a lot of people do, they don't challenge themselves physically at all. How can you ever expect we've got a body, mind, and spirit connection that is quite obvious. And how could you ever expect your mind to do much of anything other than to haunt you every single day if you're not training the physical side of things? Because that physical side, when you push on that, when I'm out on a run, I was out on a run yesterday, and I got to just keep encouraging myself like, hey, this is a good pace. And my mind is trying to take over. And it's like, dude, you cannot fucking breathe. Like, what are you doing? You should stop. It would feel so good right now to stop and just drink some water. You can walk the rest of the way. No one else is here. No one's seeing this. There's no cameras here. No one's paying attention to nothing. You could just walk the rest of the way and you can claim that you ran the whole thing. Your mind starts to do some of that. And I start to give it some pushback. And I'm like, no, remember what the goal is. The goal is to be a little bit better. The goal is to be a little bit better than yesterday. What's going to happen? What's going to happen if I push through on this? I'm okay. I'm fine. My legs aren't cramping. My body's not cramping. I'm fine. I am a little bit out of breath, So I always like to push and to kind of brush up against, is probably the best word, brush up against some suffering, brush up against some pain. I also refer to it as like fitness hygiene or strength hygiene. Like, why don't you go see how fucking strong you are today? I don't mean just like by lifting weights. I just mean like mentally. How strong are you? It's easy to talk a good game, but when you get in the mix and you are swimming really hard or cycling really hard or running really hard or lifting really hard, what you got then? When you do a couple rounds on a heavy bag, it's like, it's real easy to be real violent and be real quick, for 30 seconds. But what happens when you do 3 or 4 rounds of that for 3 minutes a pop and you got a minute rest in between each round? Again, very, very humbling.
There's so many nuggets that you just shared within that. And I love how you shared that you have like choices, right? And then if you begin to do these new habits, it'll become ingrained in you, and it almost like will establish a new level of normalcy for your life. I heard you say years ago that like one of the best things you can do for yourself is to develop your own like level of self-respect, like be able to respect yourself. And you kind of hinted at like how you do that a bit a few minutes ago, but I'd love for you to go more into depth. In your opinion, like how do you earn your own self-respect?
I think this is like the kind of fuckery of it all, is that your mind knows who you are. And when you're left by yourself and you're all alone, people tend to feel really lonely. And I just made a post today saying like, if when you're all alone, you feel lonely, it's because you're in bad company. And the way to change that, the way to flip the script on that, in my opinion, is to accomplish stuff. How do you accomplish stuff if at your job, you can accomplish stuff, right? And so you can feel good about some of that, and you can try to get out in front of that. And, your boss is happy. Other people are pleased with your work, and just being a nice person in general will earn you tons of respect, and in turn will earn you tons of self-respect. So there's many ways to get self-respect other than just to like lift weights or just to engage in fitness. But I think it's an endeavor that is massively important. It might be the single greatest thing that you can do for yourself is to be physical in some way. I think the whole point in our brain is to move us around, whether it's through what we're doing here, just some simple communication through talking, or if it's like walking, running, lifting, whatever it might be. So the greatest respect you'll ever earn, in my opinion, is self-respect. And the way that you gain/earn self-respect is through some disciplines. Telling yourself that you're going to do something and then following through and doing it, that's what putting up points on the scoreboard of life is all about. Your brain, your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit knows when you did that. It registers, it counts. It really does. It does add up. You know that you did that. It's an interesting thing, like the different things that we like value, or the different habits that we can develop around a simple value assignment that we put to something like brushing your teeth. Like, how do you make other things in your life like brushing your teeth? Or what are some other things that you do every day? A lot of times what you're doing every day is like in avoidance of something else. So brushing your teeth is to avoid tooth decay and to probably avoid getting made fun of for having bad breath. Putting on socks is an example. Like, why do we put on socks? Like, I just want to put my shoes on. Socks are a pain in the ass. I don't want to spend the extra time putting on socks. But if you don't put on socks, there's a consequence that your feet are going to stink and that you're going to like mess up your shoes. And anybody who's walked around in their shoes for long periods of time know that you can kind of ruin your shoes permanently by having your foot simply sweat in your shoe without a freaking sock on, which is a weird phenomenon, right? What are some other things that you can implement into your life that are going to be as simple as those things? What can you see other things that way? Can you say, you know what, if I just walk every day, I don't have to have the inconvenience of my body failing me later on in life. If I'm stronger going into a surgery, if I know that I need to have this knee surgery, but the knee surgery is 6 months out and I know it's in my best interest to lose some weight, I should make a goal to lose 10, 15 pounds by the time that comes around. And then by the time I get out of surgery, maybe I'll be 250 instead of being 265 or whatever it is. So I think when we're trying to think about, how to implement stuff, I think the best way to look at it is in regards to some sort of like hygiene. Like, how do I just make this is just encrypted into my everyday? What you'll notice is that at some point, you'll get to a point where when you don't do that thing, when you don't go for that run or you don't go to the gym, it's going to kind of automatically make you feel a little bit worse about yourself. And you'll do a little bit of shaming within yourself. But that shaming is healthy in a lot of ways. It can be unhealthy if you go too far with it, but it's healthy in a lot of ways. It's to keep you back on track because your mind, your body is keeping score of all this stuff. Your mind is like, hey man, like I remember you said the other day, like I was right here. You said it the other day. You said you wanted to lose 10 pounds. And then now you missed the gym and it's like, this like a whole week went by, man. Like what's going on? Like you need to go and do it. And not only is your mind engaged in that, but your body can get kind of fidgety. Your body can just feel like I need to express myself in some other way than just scrolling through Instagram or through sitting here watching TV. So I like to try to figure out how do we turn these habits into something that is kind of almost more automatic. And something we've talked about many times on my podcast is getting attached to the habits and not so much just the goal. And Seema, who's a co-host on Mark Bell's Power Project, he actually said on one of our shows when we were discussing habits and how to get them and how to obtain them, and we were talking about making goals and all these different things. And he said, why not just be attached to your habits for 30 days? Rather than like seeking in on that goal, why not get attached to the habits? What if I did the 3 things? Everybody can think right now of the 3 things that they could work on in the next month to make advances towards whatever their goal is, whether it's weight gain, strength gain, weight loss. Each person, they already know. The answers are already like within us, and the answers are a YouTube search away if there's something that you don't know. But you could very easily write down 2 or 3 things that you know that you can do. And rather than being attached to like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds this month, work your way backwards through that and say, what would it take? What are the 2 or 3 habits it would take for me to lose 10 pounds this month? If I stay attached to those, I will definitely lose weight. If I stay attached to those, maybe by the time the month passes, this is no longer a month challenge. This is like, okay, we lost 6 pounds. That was awesome. Unfortunately, I didn't get quite to the 10, but that's okay. Now I have these 2 habits that I implemented, and now I can probably try to implement a little bit more. I wonder what'll happen next month when I implement some of these other habits. And again, you say, you know what, I'm going to stick this out with those 2 other habits that I had previously. And maybe from there, you only add 1 more habit because maybe you don't need to add so many and to put too much on your plate because that can feel overwhelming. But imagine if every month that goes by, if you do that, if you kind of reevaluate, is what I'm doing working? Am I heading in the right direction? Am I making progress? If it's too daunting to look month by month, look year by year. The picture that you have in front of the Christmas tree. Are you ashamed of it? Are you kind of hiding behind some other people so they don't really see your body? Do you have a particular spot that you have to stand every year because you don't want your belly to show or whatever the insecurity is that you have? Like, did you improve from that, or are you going to look the same exact in that photo every single year?
Man, so much wisdom in what you just shared. And it's like all about discipline and staying consistent, right? And just being attached to the habit and paying attention to what you can control. I talk about this a lot with my personal training clients. There's a lot you can't control. There's many days you're not going to be able to control the scale or maybe the weight that you move in the gym. Like there's so many things that can go wrong, right? But you can control the habits that are attached to those things. And I know like habits and self-discipline were everything in your own like fitness transformation when you lost over 100 pounds. So talk about like what prompted you to go on your own weight loss transformation, going from being a power lifter to losing a bunch of weight to essentially maintaining the physique you have now.
I want to also point out to people, like, if you're not staying attached to your habits and you're really struggling, like let's say you're struggling with your diet, it's always like an easy one because most people out there are having a hard time. Like most people are aware that they have the extra body fat on them. They're aware they need to make some changes. And there are a lot of folks that are working on it. They are in the gym. They have their diet down. What I would say to you, and it's kind of an unfortunate, and I might sound like a dick face for saying it, but if your goal is to lose weight and you're currently not losing weight, you're just not quite ready for it yet. You're just not interested enough. And I know that might feel like insulting in some way, but from what I've seen in my own life experiences and in my opinion, is that so many things boil down to your interest level. How interested are you in this? If you're interested enough, you're going to figure out any which way possible to make this thing happen. And each person can kind of just apply it to their own life. They can say, well, I got the girl that I wanted and I was interested enough in pursuing her and I figured that one out. Or I got the degree that I wanted, or I kind of got the job that I wanted, or somewhere in your life you have a handful of things that you wanted, that you worked towards, that you figured out. And there's things that you're interested in enough, like bringing your kids to soccer practice on time, bringing your kids to school, picking them up, and so forth. There's these other areas of your life, if you actually open up your eyes, you'll say, oh, that's odd. I didn't think I was a person that could be disciplined. Because people will say to people in the fitness industry, they'll say, I don't have that kind of discipline. I could never eat like that. And what I'd like to say to people is you could have this level of discipline, but it doesn't start out this way. Like it doesn't look like this in the beginning. You know, I primarily eat meat and fruit. And I think it's a great thing to see if that's something that you would enjoy and something you would like. But I'm also not under the illusion that you're going to just all of a sudden be able to do that out of nowhere. So there's a lot of progress that has to happen. But again, I like to go back to that interest level, because the people that might be sharing stuff on social media about how they made millions of dollars, or how they 10x their business, or how they gained 100 pounds on their bench press, these are all things that person was interested in enough to do that. And it's cool to emulate, and it's cool to kind of watch and say, oh, I wonder what that would be like. And it's okay to try those things, but you might find out that you're just not as interested in that particular thing, and that's fine. You don't have to try to be anybody else. Continue to work on yourself and the things that you are interested in, and those things will carry you forward.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's like the old saying, like, how bad do you want it, right? Like you either want it or you don't. And you have to establish that whatever it takes mentality. So going back to you, like what was going on in your life or with your own health that you wanted to lose the weight and slim down a bit?
Yeah, to lose the weight. I was in the middle of my powerlifting career. Every competition that I went to for probably a good 5 years, I got stronger and stronger. There was always improvements. There was always improvements on the bench. There's always improvements on the squat. There's always improvements on the deadlift, and there's always improvements on the total. I'd have some errors and some miscues here and there where I would not perform as well as I wanted. But for the most part, there was a good 6-year time period where every time I got on the platform, I had stronger and stronger lifts. And so I did 1,080 squat. I ended up doing an 854-pound bench press. I ended up doing a 766-pound deadlift. Those were back in the days of geared powerlifting, where you wear bench shirts and squat suits and stuff like that. And I was training for another competition. Everything was going really smooth. My training went kind of better than ever. And I squatted 1,036 as an opening attempt. And then the next attempt was 1,085. And the third attempt, you get 3 attempts in powerlifting at each one of the 3 lifts: squat, bench press, deadlift. And it was my second attempt squat. I put it at 1,085, and the next one was supposed to be a little over 1,100 pounds, which was something I was chasing. when I went to squat 1,085, my squat suit was pretty tight. My knee wraps were on for quite some time. And sometimes in competitions, when you go to smaller competitions, it takes a while to load the plates on there and stuff. There wasn't people that were lifting the same amount of weight as me, so they had to really chuck on a bunch of red plates. And they also, you always want to make sure you get all the weights correct, but when somebody starts to lift like the real heavy weights when it comes to squats and bench press, you really want to be extra careful that you have it right. So they double and triple check it. It takes a moment. And so I was just standing there in my knee wraps for a while and my legs were going numb. I probably should have just said, I just got to undo these knee wraps and I got to scratch this turn and just take my third attempt and not even attempt my second attempt because my legs fell asleep. I was like, you know what? I've done this before in training where the legs are numb, probably not a huge deal. So I go to squat this 1,085 and as I'm going down in the squat, I don't have the proprioception. I don't have the kinesthetic awareness to like push my knees out because I can't feel my leg very well. And so I'm trying to push my knees out. And the next thing I know, one knee kind of shoots inward. The weight kind of shoots off my back, which was actually a really good thing because being under that weight would have sucked. And I got kind of catapulted forward a bit. And that pretty much ended my geared powerlifting career. From that day on, I just took it kind of one day at a time. And I was like, I don't know how long this recovery is going to take from this fall with this weight. I didn't break anything. At least I don't think I did. I never went to a doctor, never really got it officially checked out. I could have maybe broken or tore some stuff in my ankle or my foot somewhere because it was just insanely swollen. The next handful of days, as I was recovering from that injury, I was like, man, I'm really big. I'm pretty unhealthy because at that time I was probably pushing like 320 pounds or something like that. My heaviest was 330. And I was pretty damn big. And my legs, even minus the fall, my lower legs were swollen and they were like red. So my circulation wasn't great. My blood pressure was high quite often. My cholesterol and stuff like that was getting out of whack. And so being that big and not having access to that strength anymore, I was like, I think it's time for a change. So I started to lose weight. I went on a paleo diet, was the first thing I did. I got Rob Wolf's book called The Paleo Solution and kind of started my journey in that and then kind of transferred into going a little bit more keto because like the carbs on a paleo diet, there's like not that many of them anyway. So I was like, fuck it, I might as well get rid of all of them. Because for me, just like at that time, any introduction of carbohydrates would kind of trigger me to want to make like little exceptions here and there for stuff that I shouldn't have been eating. And so ultimately, I just had to kind of cut it out. And it wasn't necessarily a keto diet, but it was a very, very low carb diet, high protein diet, moderate amounts of fat. I just took it day by day. And as I went, 330 turned into, or 320 or so turned into 300. And then once I got down to 300, I was like, I'm never going to weigh 320 again. Once I got down to 280, I would give myself like a 10-pound leeway. I would say I'm never going to weigh 290 again. I got down to 250, and I was like, I'll never weigh 270 again. Stuff like that. I was just trying to, I guess, encourage myself to kind of keep going and to embed it in my mind and in my brain that this is like a more permanent thing. Like you're not allowed to ever weigh that again. Like that part of your life is done. That part of your life is over. And so let's just keep forging forward. And then eventually I got down to probably around 250 or so. And I probably took about 2 years or so. And I fluctuated a little bit from there, but never really went, once I got to like 250, I never went back above like 260. I did a pretty good job of kind of staying consistent and staying those body weights. And then I kind of took a lot of pleasure in just getting like lean and leaning out. I was like, let me turn this into a different thing. Let me see like if I can not only lose weight, but let me see if I can look jacked and tan. Let me see if I can look lean, maybe look like a bodybuilder. And so that was what I was kind of messing with and what I was after. And that kept me connected to everything since I already had the discipline of lifting weights. And I was still at that time, I was still utilizing a lot of powerlifting movements and I was still very strong. At some point I was like, screw it, I'll come back into powerlifting. And I did a couple raw powerlifting competitions, just so I kind of ended more on my own terms than anything else. But yeah, that's pretty much the weight loss journey. I was just like, you know what? I'm fat. The reason why I got so big in the first place was to gain muscle, be in a caloric surplus, gain a lot of muscle, and gain a lot of strength. One of the fastest ways to get strong is to just gain weight. And it doesn't really matter a ton on whether that's body fat and or muscle. Obviously, for the most cases, you want it to primarily be muscle. But in the sport of powerlifting, like no one really cares. It's kind of up to you. Like, how big do you want to get? How much do you want to lift? And you also get to a point where it becomes to your detriment as well. And that's kind of where I was. I got so big and took it so far, and then also had addictions with food that made that whole turnaround really, really difficult, because I would binge in the middle of the night and stuff like that, which was useful for a while for me to go from 240 to 270, from 270 to 290 and so on. But it just became a lot of ugly habits that they're still there a little bit. They'll still they'll still kind of wake up here and there. So I have to be a little cautious with the types of food that I introduce and or how I do it.
What a story with that, man. We kind of touched on this a little bit as far as like how to get through plateaus and stuff, and what to say to yourself when you want to quit on a transformation. We talked about staying attached to the habit. You talked about like some of these tricks you would play with your mind. What were some of the things that got you through and helped you, reestablish a healthier relationship with food that would allow you to continue on with your transformation when things got tough?
I think education is a big part of it. And so luckily for me that, I was already like very much into not just powerlifting, but fitness in general. And I always found fitness and nutrition to be really intriguing. So I used to read a lot about nutrition. As I learned more, and as I went, from a paleo diet to a low carb diet, as I was on this low carb diet, which I call the War on Carbs, I wrote a book called The War on Carbs. You can check it out at markbellslingshot.com if you want to check it out, or on Amazon. And in that book, which was written probably 5 or 6 years ago, I talk a lot about how just because you're on a low carb diet doesn't mean it's a no carb diet. And I introduced some carbohydrates. Even back then, I would eat some fruit. Here and there, I would eat like dark chocolate. So there's things that I'd have to do, though, where I'd have to be careful. Like, I actually love chocolate. I like chocolate quite a bit. But dark chocolate is like bitter. And so, or at least to me, it's bitter. And so like it's harder for me to eat more dark chocolate. So I have to play tricks like that on myself. If there's any potential for me to overeat something, I need to set up some sort of boundary with it. Either, buy it in small amounts, don't bring it into the house at all. Maybe if I have, like, I got to kind of barter with myself. And then I'll even tell my wife sometimes. We'll just finish dinner at a restaurant or something, and we'll say like, you want dessert or whatever. Neither one of us usually cares that much about dessert, but every once in a while, if we're at a place where we, know they have a really good dessert or something like that, we might share it. And I might have to tell her, I might say, hey, this is where this ends. Like, don't let me stop at the store and buy a bunch of junk, I might have to say like, don't let me raid the pantry or the freezer, we get home. I think there's also the other side of it is like sometimes people will say, well, just don't buy that stuff and don't have it in the house at all, which I'm in agreement with. It makes sense. It's harder to like, drive yourself to the store to go buy a bunch of crap, to do a bunch of damage to yourself. But I think there is something empowering about having it sitting right there and still choosing not to eat it. So for some households where like, that's the other thing is like, I need to realize like the whole house doesn't need to be on some particular plan just because I decided to be on one. Like, there's no reason why my kids can't have like crackers and chips and stuff here. And like, my kids are very healthy. They're very active. Like, they don't need a particular like, intervention. But for me, I might have a hard time controlling the amount of food that I'm eating. And so it was something where I had to kind of disassociate with some of these foods. Like, those foods they're just not an option for me. Like, I just am not going to eat them. And sometimes I think people would think that's like not a healthy relationship, or sometimes people think the diet I have now is not healthy and that it's not a healthy relationship with food. But I primarily eat meat and fruit, and I don't think there's anything to like really, really argue there. And I think, I don't know, people might be like, well, you don't have like tortilla chips and dip here and there, or chips and salsa, or a burrito, or it's like, yeah, I guess if I really want one, I'll have one. But since I have such a reinterpretation of food, I'm just thinking like, okay, some of the contents of the burrito would probably be pretty good for me. There's beans, there's rice, there's chicken or steak or whatever it might be. Like that's all sounds good. But do I really need a tortilla that has 70 grams of carbohydrates in it? Do I need to have sour cream, guacamole, and cheese in it? The answer is 100% yes. It's going to taste delicious that way, right? But that just really adds a lot of calories. And it just makes it to where it's a really easy thing to overeat. And if I really wanted something like that, I can make room for it. But maybe I would choose to fast going into a situation where it's going to be quite obvious that I'm going to overeat. I'm going to choose in that moment to overeat. Well, then maybe I undereat my way into that and undereat my way out of that by utilizing a little bit of intermittent fasting, or utilize some. There's a post I made a few weeks ago that people really liked. I wasn't expecting it to have such a big impact because it's something I've been doing forever. But basically, eating before you eat. And I think that this method can make dieting so much easier. So eat before you eat would be a really good example for the people listening, would be before you leave work to go home and eat, would be to have a protein shake. Or if you have a prepped meal with you, you have something that's really high in protein, depending on your body size, but 30 to 50 grams of protein. If you eat that at 4:30 or 5 o'clock before you leave work, by the time you sit down and have dinner and all that stuff, it's 6 or 7 o'clock maybe. A lot of times you're ravenously hungry and you probably already raided the pantry and stuff. But if you made the choice to have some protein, you're going to be a lot calmer. It'll be a lot easier for you to concentrate on like, oh, I'll just wait until dinner's ready, or I'll help with dinner, I'll help set the table, or whatever your various roles are in the household. And it's so much easier to make good decisions at that time because you like dampened your hunger. You quote unquote spoiled your dinner. So that's kind of what I'm asking people to do, is like spoil your dinner on purpose. Intentionally spoil your dinner. Like hopefully what you're eating is fairly healthy anyway, which is usually the case in my household. My wife cooks up some pretty healthy stuff that's high in protein. But a lot of times, maybe like an hour before we eat, I eat 70 or sometimes 100 grams of protein from having like 96% lean ground beef or something like that. So there's a strategy that anyone can use, and you could utilize protein shakes that way. I'm not a fan of protein bars. They usually have too much like junk in them, but protein shakes, even like cheese or cured meat, something like that. But I think it's important to try to go on the leaner side than it is to, have things that have a higher fat content in them.
Yeah. And you have to, I guess, find out like what works best for you in those situations and kind of curate what you do according to that. And you shared like some different hacks and tricks you've learned through the years to help you like stay on track with your nutrition. When it comes to mindset, I feel like people can easily talk themselves out of doing something good for their health, or they can rationalize why they shouldn't go to the gym or what have you. What have been some of your best practices to win the mental game when you're trying to achieve a goal or stick to something fitness-wise?
Goals can be a real bitch, and that's why I recommend trying to stick to the habit. Like imagine if you just stick to the habit of reading. Like if you just stick to the habit of, I would like to read every day. Just make that statement. Or turn it into a statement. I am going to read every day. You didn't say how many pages. You didn't say for how long. You didn't say, so it might be a good idea to have a minimum. So that way, don't just read like one word, or you don't just blow it off because it's not a challenge at all. That's the other side of that, is like if something's not challenging enough, you just won't even register as anything. So if you say you're just going to work out once a week, like that's not enough of a challenge. If you just say like, I'm going to read 5 minutes every day, like a 5-minute minimum, most likely if you're to start to read for 5 minutes, you'll probably read for 10 minutes. Some time will probably pass and you'll go, oh shit, I read a lot more pages than I expected. Maybe your goal is just to read, or maybe your habit that you're trying to form is to read 1 page every day. which would be kind of annoying, right? Because like you read one page, you took in the information, now you're excited to like learn the next couple things. So it'd be just really unlikely that you would only do that little tiny bit. There's a book called Atomic Habits, which I just recommend to everybody all the time. It's amazing. It's by a guy named James Clear. In that book, he talks about these kinds of things where he'll just tell someone who's trying to start to walk, he'll just say, they're trying to implement some walking into their life, and he'll just say, put the socks, put the shoes on, go outside. And he's like, all you got to do is just, close the door behind you, take a couple steps and walk back inside. He's like, that was a walk. Like you did walk. And then, obviously like setting a bar higher over periods of time. But I think you want to almost cheat some of this stuff. You want it to be like so easy that anybody can do it. Think about if you were to recommend this to someone that you love and care about, and you start talking to them, hey, it would be a great idea, if you started lifting weights, I think it would really help, and it'd just be great for you to engage in lifting because all the different things it does for your bones and your muscles and so forth. And so you convince them and they say, okay, well, what would be good? Like, would it be okay if I went to the gym and I just trained some arms? Like, you wouldn't be like, no, man, no, it doesn't work that way. You got to start with squats and you got to bench press and you got to deadlift. And don't forget, you got to do some cardio before the workout to get yourself warmed up. And then you got to do 45 minutes zone 2 cardio on your way out because you want to build up that heart too. And then after that, make sure you do your stretching because you don't want to become immobile and get tight from all the lifting that you're doing. You wouldn't jump down their throat like that. So why do we tend to do that to ourselves? Why don't we just say, if I can get to the gym today, I'm going to do what is the one thing that you're going to do? Just concentrate on one. By the time you do that one thing, it would be very odd for you to spend 20 minutes driving to the gym or even just walking out into your garage and only doing one thing. And what I would suggest with that one thing that you pick is to do, I'll give you something very specific to do. Do sets of 20 reps with weights that are not challenging, with weights that feel easy. Use 1 minute rest and do 3 or 4 sets of whatever that one thing is that you wanted to do. It's lateral raises, it's shoulder presses, it's lat pull downs, it's leg extensions, whatever it is. Once you get done with those 3 or 4 sets, your mind is going. Because motion is the lotion. The movement is motivation. And people think that you need to be motivated to go do something. And it's like, no. You have a misunderstanding of this and how it works. You need to move to be motivated. You're not trying to wait to get motivated to move. Movement comes first. Motivation comes second. Once you start moving and you're in motion, that is when you're going to say, fuck it. And you're going to get the fuck it's in the right direction rather than the wrong direction. You're going to say, I might as well, you look at the clock and you'd be like, rather than thinking like you don't have enough time to work out, you're like, oh, I got plenty of time to sneak in these 3-4 exercises. This is going to be great. Whereas when you're at home and you haven't moved yet, you're looking at the clock and you're like, I need to be back by 5. It's already 3. By the time I get to the gym, it's going to be 3:25. Then there's Steve that I always see at the squat rack who talks for 4 hours. He's going to be there. And then somebody's probably going to be using some of the machines that, you're going to talk yourself out of it. You're just going to automatically start to talk yourself out of it. Meanwhile, if you just would have got up off the couch and gotten in the car, you'd have been like, yeah, just cutting it kind of close, but I'll be able to get those exercises in. And once you start going, you'll be engaged in it. I've done the same thing with my running. My running started out with walking. And then one day I was just walking and I felt good enough to run. And I was like, I'm going to run from here to that stop sign. And the stop sign was, 50 feet away. And I ran to the stop sign and I didn't die. And I was like, okay, that was pretty good. Started walking again. And I was like, I'm going to run to that garbage can. And the garbage can was maybe 100 feet away. I ran to the garbage can and I was like, hey, you know what? I think I can actually just keep running. Like, why not run a little further? Run to that tree over there. And so the 100 feet turned into 200 feet. And then I'd stop again and walk because I was starting to get out of breath because I wasn't conditioned to running at all. Then periodically I would just run and I'd try to run a little further each time. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. There wasn't a lot of like rules, but that was another trick that I utilized. So tricking yourself into doing a little bit and you'll end up probably doing a lot more than you expected is a life hack that I have utilized for the last several years that has really been really beneficial to me. The same thing goes with stretching. The same thing goes with, foam rolling or any of this bullshit, like where you're like, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to do the thing that I like. Remember, I talked earlier about interest level. Well, maybe you're not that interested in foam rolling. Maybe you're not that interested in like doing all this mobility shit all the time. But can you be reasonable? Can you convince yourself to do just one thing? Can you convince yourself to get yourself engaged in that one thing for just a couple moments? Like, you can, that you can. So just force yourself to do it. I also think that surrounding yourself with like different language is important, and just not having the goals be too high, too lofty. It's something I share with a lot of people, and I've mentioned this on podcasts before, and it seems to resonate with a lot of people, is, rather than like talking about weight loss and this and that all the time, I'll just tell people flat out, try to be less fat. Just literally be less fat. I think that there's a lot of guys and girls that have had trouble with food in the past. They know what that means. Like, you don't need to eat the whole bag. You don't need to eat the whole box. Like, that. Can you do a little bit better? You can do, like, we all know, all of us know that we can do a little bit better. So like, be less fat is kind of coming from the other side of things. Like, I'm not saying you need to try to be skinny, and I don't even think a lot of people even want that. Can you be a little bit less fat? I think you can figure that out.
Yeah. So well said. And you talked about your running journey. We've talked about powerlifting. We've talked about your weight loss transformation. I know you're also a husband, you're a dad, podcaster, entrepreneur, businessman. But like, which one of these successes would you say has taught you the most, has led to the most, I think the biggest amount of personal growth for Mark Bell?
They've all worked together, I think. I don't know if there could be one that has had more growth than anything else. Maybe I would say that, I guess, if we're trying to put one over the other, I would say that I guess being a parent has taught me the most, because it makes you think of your own childhood when you have a kid. And it makes you think a lot about your parents and how they raised you. Yeah. And so that has been something that I would probably be less compassionate and less empathetic of people if I didn't have kids, because then I saw like, holy shit, man, like obviously from other people, from learning from other people, but I had it really, really good as a kid. I had like the most amazing childhood. My parents were awesome. And meanwhile, in saying that, I had one brother die from a drug overdose and another one that almost died from a drug overdose. So like, it's an interesting thing. I did talk about choices, and I talked about, the different things. But if you just get involved with the wrong thing at the wrong time, and you're the right kind of person to get tangled up in that thing, like, then you're just fucked. And it's hard to get out of it no matter what you do. And so that's why, in having somebody like yourself on my show, I love asking questions and I love learning more, because it's like, yeah, how did you dig yourself out of it? Maybe there's somebody listening right now that can dig themselves out of whatever predicament they find themselves in, whether they got there on their own or whether it was a bunch of circumstances. It doesn't really matter how they got there. They're there, and they need to figure out a way to get out of it. But yeah, being a parent, it teaches you. I think that, you can learn certain things from certain life experiences. And for me as a parent, learning the virtue of patience and learning the superpower of trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. I think this is a relationship thing, period. What's it like on their end? What's it like for my wife? How does she see me? How does she see the family? Like, why did she act or react that way to something I said or did? And then same thing with the kids. That's a huge one. What's it like for me to be my son? What's it like for me to be my daughter? Like, why'd they act that way? Or why did I get so upset with them? Or what was the situation? What happened there? And to try to view it from a different perspective. If you try to, a lot of times when you just play the other person for even 10 seconds, a lot of things that you thought will seem completely irrational in that moment. If you're just thinking, man, I wonder if I was I wonder what it's like from their point of view. And then you're like, oh, that's why they got so fucking pissed off at me. Shit, I fucked up again.
Right.
So yeah, being a parent, taught me some virtues of being patient and trying to be calm. There's never been an instant in my parenting where being more angry and more forceful yielded any positive results. Showing your kids that you care is important. So I guess there could be a tinge of anger or frustration in there that could be helpful in a way. And maybe like here and there does need to be a little bit of maybe a little bit of forcefulness of like, you're doing this because I said so type thing. But it's really rare. And I think you're better off in general explaining shit to your kids and really talking to them and really making sure you're communicating. So it helped make me a better communicator as well, because you have to really have a good way of communicating with them, telling them why can't I have a phone? Everybody else has one. And just saying, well, you're not everybody else, or that kid has different parents, or, it's just, why not explain it to them? Why not explain, like, what's your reason? What are you trying to do?
I love how you put that. And I think that what I've heard is that being a parent can really help you become patient, mentally strong, empathetic, compassionate, and also introspective. And I know one of the things that I valued most about you when I met you was when we went to work out after the podcast. I was a little intimidated because I was like, man, like, what's he going to put me through? I just know you as this dude who has accomplished these incredible things from a fitness level. And you couldn't have been more kind, compassionate, and grounded like during our time together. So was there anything else besides being a parent that has helped shape this level of groundedness and level of being able to be calm for you, or was being a parent the main thing?
I think that some of the expression of like powerlifting, was a nice outlet for me. You squat 1,000 pounds and there's just so much time. There's just so much time put into that. And it was just such a great release, but it also, it takes time. It takes a lot of time to do that. It takes decades to be able to do that, to be able to perfect a craft. And there was, that was something else that couldn't be forced. Like, it just takes X amount of time. Like, I'm sorry, but this journey is going to take you like 20 years. So I learned a lot of patience and calmness, I think, through powerlifting, which is kind of an interesting thing to learn from that sport, because it seems so intense. It seems so fast-paced in some particular way, where it's like you see the guys kind of yelling and screaming and the girls yelling and screaming to hit their PRs. But that's only for a moment, and that's only like on the big lifts. That's only on the heaviest lifts. That kind of stuff is not done in training. In training, you're more honed in, you're more focused. You're not doing as much of that kind of stuff. But I think I've always been a fairly calm person. In general, I do think that life experiences are part of it, but I also literally think that I was born this way, because I remember when I would go and hang out with my uncle, and my uncle would basically just like take me for a couple days, and my parents would go and do whatever. My uncle was always a lot of fun to hang out with. He had a boat, and like we did a bunch of fun stuff together. My cousins are kind of similar age, so I'd hang out with them a lot. And it was always an amazing time. My uncle would take me out on the boat, and we'd go fishing and do all the stuff. And then my dad would come and pick me up, and my dad would be like, how'd you like it? And I was like, oh, it was okay. I just didn't say anything. And my dad would ask my uncle, he'd be like, what'd you guys do? And he said, oh, we fished and we did this and we did that. And we had lunch and we went on the boat, and like the kids swam in the lake, and like everybody had a good time. Be like, did Mark have a good time? He's like, I don't know. Just kind of like not real emotional one way or the other. I just have kind of been that way. And then as I got older and like researching stuff and looking stuff up on like equanimity and just reading about like stoicism and some of that stuff, I was like, this is really weird, but I kind of already have some of that. And again, it could have been some life experiences. Like, I saw my brother like get arrested in front of me. I've seen him beat the shit out of people. I've seen him beat the shit out of himself. Like, I've seen some wild shit and saw some other wild things through people not being calm. And it just doesn't seem to be of extra benefit to be panicky like in any situation. So it's something that I've worked on over the last several years to try to be even more calm.
And you develop like mental and emotional strength the more you practice these things. And the last question I have for you is, I know like strength and being strong has been at the foundation of your life for quite some time. Like now, with everything that you've been through and accomplished, like what does being strong mean to you?
I think being strong as a man in particular, I think means to have a capacity above and beyond what is called for that particular situation, and then not even using it. Like, I think that's where the real power is. The real power is you have the strength to totally fucking crush somebody, but you choose not to do it because you find a different way, you find a better way. You have the ability, the capacity, and I don't mean like physically all the time. It could be mentally. You could mentally be like, holy shit, this person has no idea what they're talking about. I can completely eviscerate them and embarrass the fuck out of them and make them seem dumb or stupid to try to get my point across and to prove that I'm smarter than this person that I'm chatting with right now. It's nice just to know and to know that, or to even think. It could just be your own observation. Maybe you're not smarter than another person, but it's interesting just to ask another question behind it rather than trying to make it seem like you're smarter than them and just saying, oh, that's interesting. I wonder, why do you believe that? Why do you believe that to be true? I found something quite different. That's really fascinating, and why not just, to me, that's being strong like that. And to me, that's what it means to be. To me, that's like kind of the definition of like masculinity in a way. Like you have this ability and capacity to do something really over the top, aggressive, maybe intelligent, but you choose a route that's not going to make you look foolish.
Such a great answer. And being strong, like in many cases, doesn't have anything to do with like physical capacity. It's more the mental and emotional capacity. So Mark, this has been awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. If people want to learn more about you, they want to listen to the podcast, they want to buy some of your products, where's the best place for people to connect with you?
I'm Mark Smelly Bell on Instagram and on TikTok. I have a YouTube channel, which is also Mark Smelly Bell, where I started something called Smelly's Kitchen, which I'm really excited about and passionate about. I show people how to cook because I've gotten so many questions over the years, like, how do you cook your steak? How do you cook your burgers? How do you cook this? How do you cook that? These are all simple recipes. Each video is only a handful of minutes. And so people, I'm trying to pull excuses away from people and trying to take those excuses, crumple them up and throw them in the trash. So you can't use the excuse anymore that you don't know how to cook or something's too complicated. You can go over to Mark Smelly Bell YouTube channel and check some of that out. Obviously, I have the podcast that you've been on, Mark Bell's Power Project. Super proud of that, and super excited that just keeps flourishing and improving and reaching levels that I don't think we thought was possible before. So that continues to get better and better. And then if people want to check out some of the products, they're over at markbellslingshot.com. I started a new supplement brand recently called Within You, where we make some of the absolute, not even some, we make the best tasting proteins in the world. There's nothing that even comes close. We make something that we just put out very recently called Keto Pro. There's a vanilla and a chocolate. It's a throwback to the old school muscle milk years ago, the powdered muscle milk that you would get that had that weird grainy look to it. This has a very similar look to it. It tastes incredible. We also make something called the Steak Shake, which has liver, kidney, heart, spleen, pancreas in it, which sounds disgusting, but it's a protein powder that tastes absolutely amazing. We make chocolate, vanilla, salted caramel. We have a hydration product, and we also have fasting gum, which is also just like a lot of the things that I do are like a little tick or a little thing off of some other things that you probably maybe just have never seen before. So fasting gum is just something to help. I actually was just chewing on it before the show. just something to help encourage you with your fast. It has a couple of supplements in there to kind of encourage the fast and to make the fasting a little bit easier, because fasting can be a real bummer. It can be a giant pain in the ass.
That's incredible. I will make sure to plug all that stuff in the show notes. And real quick, why do they call you Smelly?
Just two dickhead older brothers, making fun of me. I didn't like to take showers, so they called me Smelly, and then they realized it hurt my feelings, so it was my name permanently from there.
And you've kind of embraced that, which is awesome.
Yeah, why not? Fuck it.
Yeah. Well, Mark, this has been amazing. Once again, I will make sure to include your social channels for people to connect with you and the podcast. And for those listening, there were so many nuggets in this conversation. I invite you to share a takeaway. Maybe it was something that Mark said about his fitness journey. Maybe it was something that he said about the importance of self-respect. Maybe it was something he said about his own fitness transformation, or something he said he learned about being a parent. Whatever it was, tag Mark, tag myself, because we'd love to hear your feedback. And we once again thank you for listening to this episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and we'll see you next time.